The neighborhood lay under an eternal blanket of suburban tranquility, manicured lawns stretching out like verdant quilts. Each house stood in precise alignment, a testament to order and the unyielding embrace of conformity. It was here, amid the pastel spectrum of vinyl siding and the ghostly hum of central air units, that I found my small sanctuary. The bird feeder was a modest affair, a simple wooden contraption suspended from the gnarled branch of an old elm in my backyard, a beacon for finches, cardinals, and an occasional blue jay. It was a quiet rebellion against the sterile uniformity that surrounded me. I had always found solace in the soft rustle of wings, in the delicate ballet of feathers and air. Nature, however small, was a balm to the soul. But in this curated utopia, where even the grass bowed to the will of the homeowners association, such peaceful pastimes were not without scrutiny. Karen was the self-appointed sentinel of this order, her vigilance a byproduct of idle days and a ravenous hunger for significance. Her presence was as predictable as the sunrise, a fixture at every HOA meeting, her voice sharp with the fervor of a zealot. It began with a tap at my door, a polite knock wrapped in condescension. Karen's eyes were twin pinpricks of disapproval, her smile a taut line. She spoke of regulations, of bylaws worn thin by repetition. The bird feeder, she insisted, was an invitation to chaos, a siren call to vermin and disorder. Her words tumbled out, punctuated by the certainty of her conviction. I listened, nodding at intervals, my silence a shield against her prying insistence. Inside, though, amusement bubbled. It was nearly tragic, the way she mistook structure for control, as if the universe could be corralled by suburban mandates. She left with a promise of further action, her retreat marked by the click of sensible heels on concrete. Days passed in a gentle flow, the feeder swaying idly in the breeze. But like the inevitability of high tide, Karen returned, this time armed with the weight of authority. A notice, crisp and official, appeared in my mailbox, an edict against my avian sanctuary. The irony of it tickled me, the thought of tiny birds as a threat to our ordered lives. There was a certain theater in her escalation, a drama that played out in the daily rituals of my street. Neighbors cast wary glances, whispers weaving through the fabric of our community. Yet, I found an unexpected strength in my quiet defiance. Each seed I scattered felt like a ripple, a small act of rebellion in the face of banal tyranny. And then, as the world spun in its predictable arc, the inevitable happened. The wail of sirens pierced the afternoon hush, a discordant note in our symphony of sameness. The police emerged, uncertain and apologetic, their presence a testament to the absurdity of it all. Karen stood, triumphant, in their shadows, vindication etched into the lines of her face. In that moment, amid the flashing lights and the orchestrated chaos, I felt a strange sense of calm. The universe had a way of balancing itself, of finding equilibrium in the most unexpected places. My thoughts drifted to the birds, their flight undisturbed by our human folly. And so, standing firm in the eye of Karen's manufactured storm, I knew that this was but the beginning, the unfolding of a tale as old as time, of nature's resilience against the rigid constructs of man. The afternoon sun stretched shadows across the neighborhood, every slant of light a witness to the unfolding saga. My bird feeder hung innocently, a gentle sway in the stillness of late spring. It hadn't changed much, still a simple structure of wood and plastic, yet it seemed to have become the axis upon which Karen's world now turned. I returned home from work one day to find a crisply folded letter inserted under my door. The HOA's emblem was embossed at the top, a herald of bureaucratic war. Inside, Karen's influence was palpable. The language was stiff, brimming with newfound regulations, apparently passed to maintain community standards. The ink was still drying on rules that seemed to be written with my bird feeder in mind. No outdoor structures that may attract wildlife, followed by a list of what constituted pests. Birds, yes. Stray thoughts about why another could find joy in simple things like nature, conspicuously absent. A citation was enclosed, a warning for non-compliance with the freshly minted regulation. The irony was thick and tangible, like fog that refused to lift. There was a deadline, a date by which my supposed transgressions were to be rectified. The absurdity of it all danced around my mind, a dissonant waltz of bureaucracy and pettiness. Karen's crusade grew bolder, her paranoia sprouting tendrils that wrapped around more than just the HOA rules. Gossip, the preferred currency of the discontent, began its circulation. Whispers of infestations, of unsanitary conditions, flitted like moths from porch to porch. Each retelling added another layer of dirt to my doorstep, layers even the most persistent broom couldn't sweep away. Some neighbors, previously nodding acquaintances, now cast sideways glances, their expressions unreadable behind the curtains of their own concerns. Others, those who knew Karen's penchant for drama, offered me silent nods of solidarity. The balance of allies and detractors shifted daily, a precarious tightrope act. Yet, I found a strange solace in the chaos. The birds still came, undeterred by human folly and frail attempts to control nature. They swooped and chirped, oblivious to the tempest in a teapot that swirled below. Their presence was a quiet rebellion, a reminder of the world beyond fences and petty disputes. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in hues of defiance, I caught sight of Karen on her porch, clipboard in hand, a sentinel in her own fabricated drama. Her gaze was sharp, scrutinizing the street like a hawk surveying its domain. Our eyes met for a fleeting second, a silent exchange across enemy lines. Her lip curled slightly, a micro-expression of triumph, or was it frustration? The line between the two blurred, much like the boundary between reason and obsession. In the quiet of my home, I found myself contemplating the nature of power and control. Karen's thirst for authority was evident, but her methods were as fragile as a house of cards. One gentle breeze, one misstep, and it could all collapse around her. Yet here I was, caught in her web, an unwilling participant in her theatrical performance. The seed of an idea took root in my mind, a plan that was both simple and profound. Karen thrived on conflict, on bending the rules to suit her narrative. But what if I refused to play my part? What if I let her tower of cards sway and crumble under the weight of its own absurdity? The thought was as freeing as it was daring. A rebellion, not through confrontation, but through quiet defiance. A refusal to engage, a decision to let nature, and Karen's own nature, take its course. As the evening deepened and shadows cloaked the neighborhood once more, I knew the game was far from over. But the rules, at least for me, were about to change. The day after the police visit, autumn sunlight filtered through the maple trees, casting delicate, moving shadows in my living room. I sat by the window sipping coffee, watching the leaves fall like confetti. They whispered secrets as they landed, secrets I intended to keep. Karen, with her platinum hair and perfect posture, had made a crucial misstep. She'd called 911 on a bird feeder. I smiled at the absurdity. Yet I knew better than to underestimate her persistence. In the daylight, I surveyed the landscape of our ongoing Cold War. The bird feeder hung innocently from the old oak, its cheerful colors a stark contrast to Karen's monochromatic garden, where every petal and blade conformed to her rigid standards. My crime was daring to enjoy nature, to invite it in where it belonged. I documented everything meticulously. A camera now perched like a sentinel on my window ledge, capturing every sparrow and squirrel that dared enter our demilitarized zone. Each visit was logged, time-stamped, a ledger of innocence against her accusations. I didn't want to battle, I wanted peace. But peace, like justice, sometimes needed a little nudge. The HOA guidelines became my bedtime reading, their dry language a lullaby of restrictions and allowances. Karen, I discovered, was not as invincible as she believed. Her own garden, while impeccable, was not in complete compliance. Too many lawn ornaments, too close to the neighbor's fence. Her blind spot, I realized, was her vanity. She never imagined anyone would look closely at her domain. I crafted my subtle counter with the precision of a chess player. The next board meeting was weeks away, but my case was ready. I wouldn't confront her directly. That was her style, not mine. Instead, I would plant seeds of doubt, let them grow in her mind as she had grown weeds in mine. On a crisp morning, I composed a letter to the HOA, careful to maintain a tone of concern rather than accusation. I included photos, references to the guidelines, mirrored her own tactic of using the system against itself. Irony, I thought, was the most satisfying form of revenge. The days stretched into a tense calm. The calm before a storm. Karen's gaze lingered on my house with a new wariness, sensing a shift she couldn't quite pinpoint. The birds continued their carefree flurry, oblivious to the human drama unfolding beneath their wings. They were free, untouchable, a reminder of the simplicity I longed for. The meeting arrived, and I watched as Karen stiffly entered the room, her composure like armor. I remained silent, my presence unassuming yet deliberate. As the board discussed various mundane matters, I waited. Finally, the issue of the bird feeder was raised. My heart drummed a steady rhythm of anticipation. The irony unfolded with exquisite slowness. As the violations in Karen's garden were calmly listed, her expression cracked just slightly, like porcelain under pressure. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with the unspoken acknowledgement of her hypocrisy. She had played her game too well, and now the board moved to enforce the very rules she had weaponized. In the end, it wasn't about the bird feeder. It was about boundaries, both physical and ethical, and the price of overstepping them. Karen retreated, her influence diminished, while I returned to my garden, my sanctuary. The feeder swayed gently in the wind, whispering promises of peace and resilience. The leaves continued their descent, covering the ground in a patchwork quilt of gold and crimson. Nature, unaffected by human pettiness, moved forward, and so did I. Karen's voice had become the relentless squawk of a crow, echoing in the corners of my mind. I could still hear her accusations, carried on the wind like the seeds from my bird feeder that she so despised. Attracting pests, she had called it. Her words were both a complaint and a curse, a blight on my otherwise serene existence. The neighborhood had buzzed with her tales, the latest drama in the ongoing saga of Karen versus the world. But I had tired of the spectacle. I craved quiet, the same way the birds craved the seeds I scattered. A simple, undemanding need. Her call to 911 had been the final straw. It was a ludicrous escalation, a crescendo of absurdity that had drawn the attention of more than just the curious neighbors. The police had arrived with their uniforms crisp and their expressions bemused, their presence a testament to Karen's ability to conjure chaos from calm. But chaos has a way of swirling back to its source. And I had learned the art of quiet storms, of brewing plans beneath the surface, unseen but potent. I began with the documents, paperwork, the true language of order and authority, a dance of legalities that Karen, in her fervor, had overlooked. The HOA bylaws were a labyrinth, and I had taken the time to understand every twist and turn. Somewhere in those pages lay the key to clipping her wings. The bylaws stipulated the rules of engagement, a code Karen had broken in her relentless pursuit. Her calls, her harassment, and her public antics were not just nuisances, they were violations. And violations, I discovered, carried consequences. I filed a formal complaint. The process was methodical, a steady unfurling of facts and dates, of documentation and evidence. I kept my tone measured, my words precise. The HOA board, accustomed to Karen's rants, were intrigued by my calm conviction. The letter arrived on a blustery day, its envelope stark and official against the backdrop of autumn's fading colors. It was addressed to Karen, a formal request for her presence at a meeting to discuss her conduct. The irony was delicious. She had been so focused on my supposed infractions that she had neglected to mind her own. Her face, usually animated with indignation, was now a mask of shock. She stood, letter in hand, a statue in the chilling breeze. Karen, the queen of complaints, was finally being called to answer for her own. As the day of the meeting approached, the neighborhood buzzed with anticipation. The tables had turned, and the spectacle was now hers to endure. The irony was not lost on me. Karen was about to be judged by the very rules she had wielded like a weapon. On the morning of the meeting, I watched as she walked, shoulders squared and head high, towards the community hall. There was no fanfare, no entourage of officers to mark her passage. Just Karen and her brittle confidence. I remained at home, tending to my garden, the quiet of the morning a balm to my soul. The birds flitted about, oblivious to the drama that had unfolded in their name. To them, the world was as it should be, a place of abundance and freedom. And so it was for me. For in that moment I realized that Karen, with her bluster and bravado, had taught me a valuable lesson. There is power in patience, strength in silence, and sometimes the most profound victories are won without a single word spoken. The morning light filtered through the lace curtains, casting intricate shadows on the hardwood floor. It felt like the calm after a long, relentless storm. The neighborhood buzzed with a quiet, tentative energy as folks went about their routines, the air thick with the scent of wet grass and recent revelations. I stood at the kitchen window, watching the backyard where it all began. The bird feeder, now a symbol of resilience. My little oasis of chirping chaos had been the unwitting catalyst for the unraveling of our community's facade. At the time, it seemed a small rebellion, a quiet defiance in the face of HOA's rigid conformity, embodied by Karen's unwavering glare. The drama of last night played on a loop in my mind. The emergency meeting was a spectacle of unmasking, the kind you only read about or see in movies. Neighbors who once whispered behind closed doors found their voices, while Karen, our self-appointed arbiter of propriety, watched her empire of control slowly disintegrate. It was like watching a sandcastle slowly dissolve under an incoming tide. She had called 911 again. This time, not over a bird feeder, but over an imagined slight, a claimed threat, a desperate clutch at maintaining relevance. Her shrill complaints echoed off the sterile walls of the community center, each word a thread unraveling the tapestry she had woven around us. The police, patient and used to her antics by now, listened politely. Their faces were masks of professionalism, but the exasperation was visible in the tightness around their eyes. Karen's voice was a violin string, pulled taut, ready to snap. And snap it did, in the form of a single sharp sentence from Officer Ruiz, who had seen it all. He didn't need to raise his voice. The weight of his truth did the lifting. She stood stunned, a marionette whose strings had finally been cut. In the silence that followed, every eye turned to me, not out of accusation, but with an unspoken understanding that things had shifted. The meeting ended with murmurs, a mix of relief and uncertainty hanging in the air. Now, as I stood watching sparrows and finches flit from branch to branch, I felt the neighborhood slowly exhale. There was a new sense of camaraderie, a collective realization that we had allowed a single voice to dictate our harmony for too long. The whispers of change were subtle but persistent, like the first notes of a symphony building in the distance. Karen, predictably, retreated. Her reign of order and fear met its quiet end, not with a bang, but with the gentle fall of a gavel, the finality of a door closing behind her retreating figure. She was sidelined, her authority evaporated like morning dew under a rising sun. Even her most loyal followers found themselves questioning the narrative they'd clung to. I sipped my coffee, savoring the bitter comfort. Life would return to normal, or at least a new version of it. The bird feeder swung lazily in the breeze, a small testament to perseverance. It was a reminder that sometimes battles are fought not with grand gestures, but with a quiet refusal to yield. As the sun climbed higher, I turned away from the window, feeling a sense of closure. The neighborhood had gained something invaluable through its ordeal: the strength to stand together, the courage to question, and the wisdom to change. As for Karen, she would always be a part of our story, a cautionary tale etched into the fabric of our community's history. With a final glance outside, I smiled. Life had a way of restoring balance, of mending the cracks with unexpected grace. In the end, it wasn't about victory or defeat, but about finding a voice, a song of resilience carried on the wings of small, unassuming creatures.